The Pagoda Realm is one of the most dangerous and oppressive areas in all of Black Myth Wukong. So much so that it really feels like it belongs in a Souls game, where around every corner there's an enemy waiting to ambush you. On every ledge, there's an archer waiting to knock you off. That's all before the curse that turns all the enemy's eyes red and lowers your max health. So, if you found the Pagoda Realm frustrating, I honestly can't blame you. Even after playing through all of Elden Ring and all of the Elden Ring DLC, I found the zone frustrating, mostly because it was so jarringly different from the rest of the zones in Black Myth Wukong. And so when you finally get through it, you might be breathing a sigh of relief. Oh, freedom! I know that's exactly what I did. And then you come across Captain Wisevoice, who is probably one of the most dangerous bosses that you face, at least up until this point in the game. And so today, I'm going to be talking about some of the attacks he used on me, and the strategy that I used to beat him. With that said, don't consider this as much of a formal boss guide as something like my Yellow Wind Sage boss guide. I feel like I got really lucky. I beat Captain Wisevoice in like 3-4 attempts, and as a result of that, because I didn't spend hours wiping on him, I don't think I took the full time to learn all of his intricacies and mechanics. So the first thing I noticed is, this boss is massive. In fact, he's so massive that you can only really chop at his ankles, which reminded me a lot of the golems in Elden Ring that had similar weak points. So I tried to focus most of my damage on the glowy, injured arm that he had. If you do this for long enough, the boss gets staggered, allowing you to hit his head. Now, I strongly advise thrust stance here, because it makes damaging the head easier, and I also noticed that when he's staggered, his head takes a lot more damage, so you can absolutely blast off a massive chunk of his health with a charged heavy. In between, don't really focus too much on damage, try your best to focus on avoiding his attacks, but because he has so many deadly attacks, that can be a little bit more challenging than it at first sounds. First up, his Lightning Storm. He fires what appears to be a little bit of a disco laser, and then causes several puddles of electrical energy to appear, shortly after which thunder strikes. Get out of the puddles, feel free to sprint around to give yourself more mobility, dodge if you need to, just make sure you don't get hit. One thing that I didn't think to use during my fights that I absolutely should have is Shock Quelling Powder. This will clear the thunder and shock effects, also temporarily giving you some immunity to it, which makes it much easier to deal with his boss, as if you're shocked you take a lot more damage. And trust me, you do not want to be taking extra damage, because you know that really annoying madness that was persisting throughout the Pagoda Realm? Yeah, this guy's responsible. His voices in your head will make you go insane. When he inflicts the madness move, not only does your screen get all weird and wonky, which makes it incredibly difficult to dodge, but also your health gets lower, which means a lot of his combos, like his grab, will one-shot you. You're just going to be dead. Speaking of, he only used the grab on me once, so he doesn't seem to cast it too frequently. I'm not 100% sure of the cast conditions, but I have a 0% success rate in avoiding the dodge, and therefore a 100% death rate to it. Now, below 50% health, the boss begins putting on a disco light show where lasers spin everywhere. Do your best to avoid them, and avoid the puddles of electricity. Again, anti-shock medicine here is good to remove the damage taken debuff. When the sequence gets to the end, the floor starts glowing yellow and then red, after which it explodes for absolutely massive damage. Now you can either jump into the air or tank it with either stone form or a transformation. Personally, I really struggled for the timing on this one. I kind of wish that the floor had, instead of just getting redder and angrier, it flashed a couple times right before it exploded, so I knew, oh, okay, it's not just charging up, now it's going to go boom. I guess if you want, you can replay this section of the video and continue to watch to get better tells, but I also found that I was able to tank it, so maybe tanking it isn't necessarily the worst thing, though my healing was very scarce at the end, and I almost died due to these choices. It is especially important to use something like a transformation if it overlaps with a curse, so I would actually recommend saving your transformation for 50% health. As his health gets lower, he also begins using a laser beam, followed by a line of explosions. The move is really fast, so it's pretty hard to avoid, but if you are trying to avoid it, dodge left or right so that you can easily move out of a line afterwards. Do not dodge forwards or backwards, as that's going to leave you in the literal line of fire. And one last thing that he does as his health gets lower is what I'm going to call his Shockwave Stomp. This can be dodged by either jumping over it or rolling through it, but it's pretty hard to dodge at close range because it comes out faster than you'd expect. This is something that I didn't do very well, as I hadn't seen the move too many times, but I did dodge it by the end of a fight, and I was really happy when I did because my health was super low, and I probably would have wiped if I didn't avoid that. But now, with all that said, here's how the fight went for me, and again, I had not done this nearly as many times as some of the other fights. I made a lot of mistakes here. This is by no means perfect, but hey, maybe you can learn something from my mistakes, and hopefully your fight's going to be smoother as a result. Now, defeating Captain Wisevoice gives you a key item that is used for the 4 Captains quest. Before completing this quest, I strongly advise that you defeat Captain Wisevoice first. That way you won't have to deal with a madness effect throughout the rest of the Pagoda Realm. The next thing you need to do is defeat Captain Lotus Vision, who's found in the Pagoda Realm, specifically right near the Upper Pagoda Shrine. Starting from there, simply jump down, try to hit the rooftop to avoid taking unnecessary fall damage, and then you'll find him in a room. Then, if you're anything like me, you'll die an embarrassing number of times to him, because all he does is shoot laser beams at you that proved significantly harder to dodge than I was expecting, and run away. But eventually, I was able to defeat him, get the key item, and unlock all of the purple sealed doors. This is where you can get a little bit of extra lore and continue the quest by talking to the man in the cage who first shouted out to you when you escaped your cage at the very start of this area. Teleport to the first shrine in the Pagoda region, and then simply run left back towards the very start of the level. There's a dead end there, and he is in the second cage starting from the dead end. This is also where you get a pretty nifty transformation, that you can turn yourself into a rat guy, and yes, you can explode just like the enemies in Chapter 2. So he will ask you to save his captains, and by save, of course, he means kill. At this point, you've probably already defeated 2 of them. The other 2 are located in the Village of Ecstasy area. The next one you're likely to find is in the Village of Ecstasy along Longevity Road. That is Captain Void Illusion, except instead of having to do a terrifying boss fight, Captain Void Illusion is already dead. So simply follow the path away from the shrine into the woods, and you'll come across his corpse, loot the item, and you're good to go. And here's a quick clip of me walking to that location. And then last up, Captain Kalpa-Wave. He's guarding the entrance to the new Thunderclap Temple, so he should be pretty hard to miss. Personally, I kind of just beat up his ankles, and then when his health got low, I popped all my damage buffs and took him down pretty easily. I don't have too much insight on his mechanics, to be honest with you, just because, again, I took the boss down in one attempt. I noticed that he tended to use a lot of jumping and stomping attacks, and he fired blood projectiles at you. But overall, he doesn't have too much health, which means if you're able to freeze him with Immobilize, use a transformation, or cast your Pluck of Many, you should be able to burst him down with relatively few issues. Overall, Captain Kalpa-Wave felt like an easier version of Captain Wisevoice, especially since there's no madness debuff. Though just because he moved around a lot, it was significantly harder to land the heavy attacks, which did cause me to lose a fair bit of damage uptime. And so for a little more of that, here's how the fight went for me. After that, bring the key item from all 4 captains back to the prisoner, turn it in, listen to some dialogue, and collect your sweet, sweet rewards, including the first weapon that is not a staff. Personally, I'd say Captain Wisevoice was a pretty challenging fight. Like I said, I really do feel like I got lucky. I didn't play the best, but I did manage to get through it. And so hopefully my experience helps you defeat Captain Wisevoice and complete the 4 captains quest. Out of all of them, Captain Lotus Vision felt like the worst to me, not because he was super challenging, just because he was so annoying. He would constantly run away and fire barrages of projectiles, which as a melee-only character, I absolutely hated. And Captain Wisevoice also felt quite difficult, with a lot of attacks that were either hard to read or simply very fast that made them difficult to avoid. But that said, after a few attempts, I did manage to persevere. And so I'm curious, how do you feel about big monster fights in games? Do you like the feeling of just chopping at something's ankles to eventually hit its weak point, or would you rather just face a foe that's at least reasonably sized? Personally, I really don't mind them. It does give a good impressive sense of scale, but I also kind of wish that the camera would zoom out just a little bit more so I could see more of the enemy and read their attacks. Both with Captain Wisevoice and also on Fuban, I got hit by a lot of the head slams that just shouldn't have hit me, mostly because I couldn't see if they were coming since my camera was way too close to the boss and I couldn't see what his head was doing. But hey, let me know some of your thoughts down in the comments below. If you're looking for other Black Myth Wukong boss guides, again, get subscribed. I'm going to come out with more in the future. But if you missed some of the optional quests in Chapter 1 or Chapter 2, then I have a guide on how to beat Elder Jinshi, I have a guide on how to beat Shigandong, a hidden boss, and how to get the Wind Tamer Vessel and beat Fuban. While that item is mostly useful for the Chapter 2 boss, it, along with a fire resistance item from Jinshi, do remain useful throughout the game for many other encounters, so I would highly recommend that you do them. Links to those are up in the card and down below. Also, a big thanks to everyone who watched the video to the end. I'm glad you enjoyed. Hopefully this made your Pagoda Realm a little bit less frustrating. Now, if you want to directly support the creation of videos like this, you can do so using my Patreon. For as low as $1 a month, you can make a significant difference in ensuring that more videos like this are possible. Link to support is down below. And a big thanks to everyone who watched to the end of the video. I'm glad you enjoyed, and hopefully this helped you from going quite as insane as I did during the Pagoda Realm. It's certainly one of the most frustrating areas in the game, and I suspect there's a good few players who just up and quit here. Because, like I said, it feels like an Elden Ring level. And you know what? When I'm playing Elden Ring or Dark Souls, I'm expecting enemies to be dicks. I am not expecting that in Black Myth Wukong, because usually it doesn't happen. Usually, if you walk around a corner, there isn't an enemy waiting to smack you in the face. If you go near a ledge, there isn't something waiting to knock you off. So overall, I found this to be a pretty jarring and generally unpleasant experience. And so I'll see you next time for a fight in an area that's not nearly as frustrating.